help us through what's happening here. Are you hopeful that we're going to reach an agreement? And is their agreement going to have teeth?
Ultimately, you'll reach an agreement. My guess is it might take a little bit longer than the beginning of next month. You'll probably see the biggest progress in the area the president cares the most about, which is the reduction of the trade deficit. Economists may feel otherwise, but he cares most about that. Other areas, you'll probably get a lot of Chinese promises, but life's about implementation, 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 and you're unlikely to see a lot of that.
You're sitting next to an economist here, so let's ask the economist, how do you feel about what he just said? Is he right?
I think there will be a deal. I think both sides have incentive to bring a deal in, and you know, we're going to have to see what the details are.
But the implications of the tariff issue, more important to the president, more important to economists. How are economists going to look at it?
Bilateral trade deficits aren't as important as they're sometimes made out to be.
Yeah, what you're not going to get is some of the fundamental structural issues. China is not going to change its fundamental economic model, the state role in the economy, simply to get a deal with us. So the high degree of subsidization will continue. You'll get promises on technology transfer and technology theft. We'll see whether this time around they're implemented. Again, I think most of the progress will be on tariff and non-tariff barriers, and in particular on this. You'll probably see a commitment on China's part to buy liquid, LNG.
You sound very skeptical of these memoranda of understanding, or you are of the belief that these memoranda will be signed by both parties, but some of them simply will not be in effect.
Well, exactly, and that's what we've seen over the decades, where China's agreed not to take, American films. Well, then they continued to take, to violate copyright. In 2015, you had the agreement to stop theft over the internet. We continue to see theft over the internet. So again, I'm not saying there won't be any progress in these areas, but by and large, there's going to be, I think, at most limited progress there. The optics, though, this president constantly talks about trade deficits. Most economists don't see bilateral deficits as terribly significant, but I think he'll be able to say we've got, what, a $325 billion deficit? Over the next 5 years, 3 years, 7 years, that's going to be halved or disappear. And for a lot of people, that will be seen as progress.
So it sounds like you're saying the U.S. team should push very hard on enforcement.
Absolutely, but you can't get enforcement guaranteed up front. Yeah, that's about implementation. So you'll sign an agreement, and we'll only know about enforcement over the next 2, 3, 5 years.
Trust but verify.
Or we'll know if Visa or MasterCard or a service provider like that is allowed into the Chinese market.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, though. Do you look at this as related, or is this going to be unrelated to what feels like a much larger shift between what was a cooperative relation to one that's being oftentimes described as confrontational?
Well, you're right. And economics, after the end of the Cold War, we lost a strategic rationale for the U.S.-Chinese relationship. We had a common adversary in the Soviet Union. Economics and trade and investment became the glue of U.S.-China's relationship. That now is frayed, to say the least. There's a lot of friction there. So right now you've got a relationship.
Was that inevitable, though?
No, but I think what happens when we brought China into the WTO, which I think was the right decision, we didn't monitor it nearly closely enough, and too many people thought we could give China a pass, but it would ultimately mellow politically, it would become more open economically, and essentially...
Who do you blame for that?
Well, that's people who say there's not enough bipartisanship in American foreign policy, trust me, there was enough bipartisanship on that one.
The other thing I was going to mention is Huawei in all of this, because that's become this sort of very strange chess piece, and not necessarily in this trade negotiation, but it sort of has been a cloud over all of this. There was an interview just yesterday on CBS with the CEO of Huawei, who said effectively that they are not a state actor. But we, the U.S., have taken a number of very aggressive steps against the company, but even more broadly, and claimed that most of those steps relating to national security issues. But at the same time, we are pursuing what seems like a almost nationalistic strategy around 5G. Right. And so are they connected, or are they something else?
Well, the Huawei prosecution, I think, is more legal, but I think it's a canary in the coal mine. The U.S.-China technology relationship is going to change fundamentally. You're going to see much more separate supply chains. We don't trust the Chinese not to steal technology. They don't trust us not to sanction them. And I think, we've seen CFIUS much tighter on inward investment. By and large, these two economies it's not going to be a divorce, but there's going to be a significant degree of separation.
If you're an American, go ahead.
So Richard, we got Vietnam next week and North Korea again. The president has said, I'm not going to push too hard on denuclearization right now, but we're going to keep talking, right?
You're going to have an agreed goal of denuclearization.
What do you think? When you wrote world in disarray.
Yes, sir.
That was a couple of years ago, and you were a pretty outspoken critic of Obama in terms of foreign policy. Is the world more in disarray right now or less in disarray right now?
Considerably more. What this president has done is introduced a degree of uncertainty and unreliability.
Even with the North Korea situation, there's no missiles headed over Japan right now. There's
Well, what you have with North Korea, though, is the United States essentially has accepted North Korea's nuclear
well,
weapons
we did
and
before,
missiles.
but at least in this case, we're talking, and there's no bellicose overt moves that we're seeing. There's no progress. You think we're worse off with North Korea than we were at this point?
I think we're both better off and worse off, Joe. I think we're better off that we're talking in North Korea.
You should definitely be in government. We're better off and worse off.
I'll explain. Let me make
or you know what? Or go work for the Fed.
do that too. We're better off because North Korea has stopped the overt testing.
Yeah.
I presume they're continuing to do things covertly. They're doing simulations with computers and the like. For all we know, China is doing some testing for them. But North Korea is doing nothing to reduce its conventional military threat, nothing to reduce its nuclear stockpile. If anything, it's growing. And meanwhile, South Korea is reducing sanctions, and we are, I think, on the cusp of reducing sanctions. All the pressure on North Korea is going to begin to fade.
James, I want to get back to China and ask you from an economist standpoint how you look at the Chinese. I mean, the Chinese economy is slowing. That is a concern for the markets right now. If they do embrace what is agreed upon in these reported memoranda of understanding and they do change their economy, can the Chinese economy achieve the growth that it had under this new sort of way of doing business?
Potential growth is slowing. It's been slowing for a long time in China. It will continue to slow, but they've got an aging population, so they've got longer-term issues. But obviously, 6% is something we'd like to see here.
Do you really believe they're growing at 6%?
But I think right now, the trade war impact has been significant on China. I think they're growing more slowly. The CEOs and other people that I talk to, the anecdotal reports are all that China is growing significantly more slowly than the official numbers indicate. And that's feeding into other countries, other parts of Asia and Europe.